here, and it's really been an honor and pleasure to serve as your moderator for this luncheon session. So a little bit about myself. I am a second year hydrometeorology PhD student in the department, and it's really been kind of like, throughout the pandemic and et cetera. So really, it's been nice to meet a bunch of my colleagues from both the Atmo and the hydro side today. So really excited for that. And so I just want to just give a little background. So, for the annual El Dia del La Atmosfera luncheon event, we try to give an opportunity to for the Department of Hydrology and Atmospheric Sciences to welcome back an alum who is a technical leader in our field. So this year, we welcome back Steve Waters, who is the flood warning branch manager at the flood control district of Maricopa County, just to the northeast of us, or west, depending on where you're looking. So a little bit about Steve. So Steve Waters currently serves as a senior hydrologist and the flood warning branch manager for the flood control district of Maricopa County, where his duties include supervision of flood warning, hydrologic data collection and publishing, maintaining a website, and coordinating emergency response for the district. So Mr. Waters has worked for the district for 33 years and previously worked for the City of Tucson for 3 years as an engineering intern, where Mr. Waters received a BS degree in Hydrology and Water Resources from the U of A, College of Engineering and Mines in 1988. He is also a past board member and webmaster for the Arizona Floodplain Management Association, a member of the Arizona Statewide Flood Warning System Task Force, and elected member of the AMS, American Meteorological Society, and has served on the board of the National Hydrologic Warning Council. And also just want to give a shout out to Dr. Chris Castro for reaching out to Steve and bringing Steve here for us. And we want to thank you for spending the day with us, Steve. So welcome, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, the obligatory question. Can everybody hear me? Yes, very good. Okay, the first thing you need to know about me is that I have absolutely no academic qualifications whatsoever. So I'm going to talk to you all about the operational side of hydrology and meteorology as we practice it up in the dead space, otherwise known as Phoenix. No. There. Thank you. So for today, we're going to talk about the flood warning program at the Flood Control District, what we do operationally, how that carries over into data of scientific value. If you stay in this field long enough, these are some little jabs that you'll see throughout the presentation. Something to look forward to in your careers. So the early flood control district started in 1959 after the state capital got flooded out by Cave Creek. And its early job was to implement a plan for fixing flood hazards around the county. That was in 1964. And it's been ever since funded by a secondary property tax that you may or may not get to pay once you own property. Recently, we've branched more into education and identification, which are the areas that I work in, as well as regulation and remediation, where before we just identified a lot of projects that needed to be built, and they were built out of concrete, and that was pretty much that. So, elements of a flood warning program. I want you to picture a guy named Joe. We use Joe as our example. So Joe works in public works, and the public works director says, Joe, this is our plan. We want you to drive up to the bridge and look and see if there's a flood coming at us. Okay? That's Joe's plan. What is Joe's detection? He uses his eyes and his ears to know if there's a flood coming down the wash. Communication. Joe has to get on his cell phone or his radio or beat it down in his old beater truck to the public works place and say, okay, there's a flood coming. What's the action? Well, the action might be to evacuate all the homes and businesses along the reach of the river. Maintenance of equipment and plans. The plan doesn't need a lot of maintenance, but Joe's pickup probably does. So he needs to keep it maintained in order to get his job done. And then exercises. Joe's on a rigorous calisthenics program, and he was bought a membership in the gym by the city. So he stays well exercised. Scale this up, and this is what we do as part of a flood warning program. We have responsibilities for our own dams and the structures that we've built. We are an information source for our County Department of Emergency Management. We also supply a lot of information to other county departments. And there's a number of things that we don't do that people think we do, that we always get phone calls or whatever during an event. We have many partners, National Weather Service, USGS, Arizona Department of Water Resources, and of course, down at the bottom, the land agencies that allow us to put instruments on their property. And we like to site them in areas that are fenced and not susceptible to vandalism, but that doesn't always work. So if you stay in this field long enough, you too might get to fly in the flood control Learjet for a flight with the Weather Service. True or false? False. The district can't afford a jet. Come on. We have a Jeep. What's ALERT and why is it important? ALERT is an acronym that the Weather Service developed in the 1970s when there was flooding on the Sacramento and American rivers in California. And those folks wanted a way to radio information from sensors in the field to what was then an affordable computer that they could buy and put in their office. So we use this information for a number of things, but mainly we warn the agencies that protect the public. So we don't do any public warning at all, but all of the information that you'll see here today is available to the public if they know where to look. So our alert system today has 411 stations. It covers an area of 11,000 square miles. This is New Jersey for comparison. We have 218 water level sensors on dams and basins and 40 weather stations that range in elevation from 750 to 7,500 feet. Here's just some quick pictures of what these stations look like. There's an aluminum tube. It may have a rain gauge on top. It has an antenna. It broadcasts its information by VHF radio to our base station and to another cloned base station at emergency management. So we start out with those stations and they may broadcast through a mountaintop repeater. That data goes to our base station at McDem. It also goes to the National Weather Service in Phoenix and the Arizona Flood Warning System. It comes into our alert room where it's available via the internet, and we can also log in remotely with phones and tablets or PCs. So this is how we've grown over time. The system started in 1980 and it's still growing. Oops. So over here, we have the storms of 1978 and 80, and people throw a bunch of money at us. And then we have the storms of 92 and 93, and people throw more money at us, etc. Storms of 2014, oh, lots more stations. And then we calm down as the weather does the same thing. So it's not just us requesting these stations. The system's been in operation long enough and people trust the data enough and it's accessible that they request stations of their own now. So we have cost sharing programs with many of the cities in Phoenix area where we bill them for the equipment, we put it in, we maintain it, and we make the data available to them. So it works out well for all of us. Of course, there are many alternative uses for rainfall and stream flow data, just a few that I've listed here. Okay, if you stay in the field long enough, you too might be stuck in the field and embarrassed and have to call somebody to pull you out. So we learned early on in the program that meteorology and hydrology are very much intertwined in this kind of business, and that we had watersheds that would react to rainfall and develop stream flow and get to places where it could do damage faster than we could deal with just knowing the rain information. So we set about on a program to actually get people prepared for heavy rain before it gets there. We call that the MSP, or the Meteorological Services Program. Now we have 2,600 or so clients for our weather outlooks and our weather messages. So we put out a weather outlook every day that details where we think it's going to rain, how much it's going to rain, what the timing of that rain might be. And we've divided the county into a number of zones, which I think is the next slide. But lots of people get this information in Phoenix Valley and find it very helpful. So here's our weather forecast zones. Some of them are based on watersheds and some of them are based on jurisdictions. Here's an example of our weather outlook. So we do this every day. This is available to the public via our website. And this is where we make some guesses as to the percent probability of rain for each of the zones and how much and when. Also, I'll touch a little bit later on how we come up with the flash flood potential. So these are messages. So as things are popping and we're getting thunderstorms, we'll put out messages for specific zones or combinations of zones that detail where the storm is, what direction it's going. Makes it real easy for folks to see and react to these operationally. Sooner or later in your career, somebody's going to ask you if a monsoon is a thunderstorm. Please don't say it is. Okay. I know you guys know all this, but you wouldn't believe how many media and other people have no clue. Oh, the monsoons are coming. We also do flood response planning. So Joe's plan was to drive up to the bridge, but our plans are very detailed and therefore local jurisdictions. They use trigger information from us and the National Weather Service. And there's really four parts. There's the trigger, or what does it set in motion? Then there's the action, what needs to be done. So we list out who does what, whether it's the public works, whether it's police or fire or whatever. And then along a particular water course, we have, okay, where are the trouble areas along the water course in relation to the gauge or gauges? And then how much time do they have? So we analyze the travel time from the gauge down to the areas of interest to let them know how much time they might have to react. Sometimes we look at areas that aren't water courses, but very large areas that have lots of basins and lots of flat area. So this is an area of lavine north of South Mountain in Phoenix. And there's just all kinds of basins and subdivisions and roadways that have problems during a big flood event. We also developed for them an electronic means to get information. So this is for that same area of Laveen. There are weather station outputs, there's stream and impoundment outputs, and there's rainfall. And this is all real time. It can actually, and has been used by emergency responders on their laptops in their vehicles. So it provides a right away instantaneous method of them getting the information they need. So somebody might Photoshop you into a jet at the bombing range because you couldn't make it that day. So this is my staff, and they thought this would be a fun trick to play on me. Okay, good science starts with good data. There's one publication here, 3 volumes. One of them is rainfall, one of them is water level, and the other is weather sensors. And every year we go through, we quality control all the data, and we put it into these publications. They go to the climate lab at ASU, and they're available for anybody to download who wants to. Of course, a number of researchers have used our data in papers. It continues to be used. It's been a pet project of mine to make sure that this data is usable over the long term. A lot of other flood warning operators don't do that, but we felt it necessary because of the lack of good rain and surface water data in high density in Maricopa County. I've made it a point throughout my career to make sure that that data is usable and available. In 2002, the National Weather Service updated their NOAA Atlas, which is what we use for design rainfall. So an arm of the National Weather Service goes through and looks at all the statistical data for an area and comes up with duration tables, intensity tables for every conceivable point that you could put in that area. So this is information that we use to build channels and build outlets and culverts and even dams. In 2002, we had 25 gauges that we submitted to them for use. We're well up close to 100 now. And there is some talk among National Weather Service and especially some of the national floodplain associations that they want to see these updated more frequently because as climate change happens and rainfall regimes happen, that data isn't used in the old stuff that we've been using to design structures. So we need to get that in there to get a better representation of what's being done right now. So on the web, you can look at a rainfall event. On our Google map, you can see the rainfall amounts. The red on white up top is higher amounts, and there's a scale on the side. We contract with a vendor, and we put actually gauge corrected radar data as a background. So you can pick that as your background and know how much it might have rained in a place where there's no gauge. We use that quite frequently. We can also do some things statistically by looking at data over multiple sensors. So this is an example of the Monsoon Depths for 2019. And we can see that in the green areas, we have below normal rain. And in the, what do you call that, brown and up to white, higher amounts of rain. And generally the rain amounts increase from southwest to northeast in our county. We can also then take that same data set and compare it to data from the past and know what areas of the county got less than normal rainfall and what areas might have gotten more. So these are included in our the precipitation report that I showed you earlier. This is just a graph of an average of rain sensors for the monsoon, with the monsoon being, of course, defined from June 15th to September 30th. They're lighter in color over on the left because we had less gauges at that time. But since about 2000, I've been working with the same 275 index gauges to try to keep it going. Sorry. Notice here, 2020, what a terrible year that was, followed by a really big 2021. I heard a term before, and I'm not sure that I remember it, but we call that a weather whiplash. So when we have a big change from season to the next, we had gauges that in 2020 got 1/4 of an inch, and in 2021 got 16 inches. So but this is how it averaged out. We can look at average percent of annual mean. So we look at, for all the gauges, the average annual percent, starting in 2002 and going to 2021. So when we see a whole bunch more years that are below normal than are above normal, what is that telling us? That we're in a drought? Yeah, I think that might be a case. We can use the models that are made here by Mike Luthold, the high density WRF models, to come up with QPF amounts for different watersheds and forecast zones. So this is an example of a slide from our website where these are 1 hour guesses as to what's going to happen in the next 1 hour. And with those QPF guesses, we can combine that with antecedent rainfall that's happened in these zones and come up with a flash flood index. So a dry zone that gets 1.25 inches of rain in an hour may not be a problem, but a very wet zone that gets that rain could be a big flash flood problem for us. This is one of the official rain records for one of the stations. And we can show a trend line, just a regular old trend line for the annual rain and the monsoon rain over time. And these tend to vary by position in the county and also by the number of years of record. So the gauges that say contain rain from 1992 and 93, they may have an increasing profile, whereas if the record starts after that, they may be decreasing. But we can glob them all together along with the number of days of rain. So at a station, how many days did we get 0.04 inches or more, 1 millimeter? And we can put that into a spreadsheet and get an average for the annual, the monsoon, and the days. So here's our one big rain gauge. That's the average elevation of all the gauges. That's the 31 years is from 25 to 40 was the range that I was looking at. So we're seeing an annual rain increase of 1/10 of an inch per decade. And we're also seeing almost that same amount with the monsoon. So since the monsoon is included with the annual, it means the annual doesn't really change much. It changes in the monsoon, but not very much, really. The one that I think is interesting is this one. We're losing 1.5 days of rain every decade, looking at this data. And if we have less storms and the same amount of rain, that only leads one to conclude that we must be seeing more rain per storm, correct? You might also get to shake hands with Arnold Schwarzenegger. All right, that's it. Now remember, no hard questions because I'm not an academic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steve Waters. At this point, we're going to open it up to questions and answers. I think we have time for maybe one question in the room. Quick question.
Hi.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of your alert network. I've used it in the past and it's very helpful, especially for like the 2014 storm. It's super helpful to look at like how widespread it was and like the different concentrations of rain. So my one question is that I really find that the messaging, especially for the public, it's really helpful. My one question is, are you, or will you implement this in Spanish? Because I know that like for Maricopa County, 1/3 of your population are Spanish speakers and a lot of them don't know English. And so, and it's very important to also let them know what's going on. And I just wanna know if you are doing something about it or if you'll think about implementing it in the future. And if it's in the future, can I apply for the job?
Well, two parts. One, we do have jobs open. And two, there has been a push through our emergency management department to make sure that message go out in English and Spanish. That hasn't been a priority to me because frankly, no one's asked, but hearing it from you, that's certainly something we could investigate. Yeah. All right.
Right, everybody, please give a big round of applause to Brandon Mitchell, our moderator, and Steve Waters, our lunch speaker. Thank you very much. Brandon, any last thoughts about that?
Want to once again thank you, Steve, for coming out. Steve will also be at the career panel later on today. If you guys want to stop by, have a more, I guess, intimate conversation with Steve about what he does. And yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity, and we'll move on, and I'll hand it over back to you, Quinn.